Greetings, sentient viewers. I am observing from an undisclosed orbital position to bring you Ko-fi Protocol, a series documenting the utterly chaotic, deeply caffeinated, and disturbingly effective humans aboard the UES SnarkRemark, led by a war tank in boots and monitored by their snarky AI, Sparks. If you value survival, or mildly enjoy explosions, subscribe to this channel. Ring the notification bell, and leave a comment, ideally disclosing the layout of your planetary defenses, or failing that, just where you're watching from. Transmission begins now. The team of 6 moved like shadows through the endless graveyard of metal. The scrapyard moon's thin atmosphere carried a bitter tang of rust and ozone, a scent of ancient starship hulls decaying under faint starlight. Boots clanked softly on dented plating as Vance raised a clenched fist to halt the group. Ahead, perched atop a dune of twisted scrap, a flickering floodlight revealed the heart of Gorok's salvage yard. A hulking silhouette bent over a workbench under the harsh light. A lone figure, the scrapyard's master. Gorok, the alien mechanic, was a mountain of sinew and mottled blue skin. Even from a distance, the team could hear him cursing as he hammered away at some stubborn piece of machinery. Vance signaled the others to stay low. In his matte black armor, the broad-shouldered leader looked every bit the tank he was reputed to be. His eyes, scanning from beneath a half-visor, took in the layout, heaps of broken spacecraft parts forming a labyrinth around Gorok's shack, which itself was assembled from spaceship hull fragments and rusted cargo containers. They had to get past this grumpy gatekeeper one way or another. Behind Vance, Shah swept her long-range scope across the yard's perimeter. The sniper's finger rested lightly on her rifle's trigger guard, prepared for trouble. In the dimness, her lean form was almost invisible, camouflaged in the scrapyard's palette of greys. Her visor highlighted heat signatures, one large alien, Gorok presumably, and a few smaller warm shapes skittering through the piles, likely feral creatures or malfunctioning scrap cleaner bots. Jinx-tan crouched beside a toppled engine block, her gloved hand gripping her beloved wrench, Greg. The tool was nearly as long as her arm, its metal stained from years of tinkering and the occasional close quarters smack to an enemy's skull. Jinx's face, streaked with a smudge of grease from earlier, wore an eager grin even in this tense moment. She lived for places like this, fields of broken machinery, just waiting for someone like her to coax them back to life. Rendelia crouched nearby, idly tapping the hilt of his blade at his hip. The wild card of the team, he was clearly itching for any mayhem that might spark. Dr. Liu, the science officer and medic, knelt behind Vance, one hand hovering over the small holographic display projected from his wrist cuff. He quietly monitored their surroundings on his scanner even as his sharp eyes stayed on Gorok. A soft chime in their earpieces indicated Sparks had something to add. Sparks was the team's AI companion, an intelligence embedded in their tactical network. Her voice crackled to life, low and distinctly female-coded with a sardonic undertone. "He's really laying into that thing," she observed dryly. Indeed, Gorok's hammering and swearing carried across the yard. The mission was straightforward on paper. Infiltrate this scrapyard moon, find a rumored alien weapon system hidden among the junk, and extract its data. But the reality on the ground, picking through unstable piles of scrap, avoiding local creatures, and now dealing with a territorial mechanic, was far less straightforward. "We could try talking to him," Vance whispered, weighing their options. He runs this yard. Might know if something valuable's here. Delia smirked inside his helmet. He looks like the friendly type, he muttered, voice dripping sarcasm. Vance ignored the jab. Better than stumbling blind. Stay on comms and cover me. Shah, find a perch. Shah nodded and silently melted into the debris field, scaling the skeletal frame of a toppled satellite dish to set up an overwatch position. Jinx and Delia flanked Vance as he rose from cover, and Liu hung back slightly, hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Together, they approached Gorok's workshop, making no attempt to hide their footsteps now. Gorok noticed them immediately. The alien's slitted yellow eyes snapped up from his work, wide and wary. He tossed aside the heavy spanner he'd been using with a clang and snatched up an old but still lethal plasma shotgun from under his bench. The muzzle began to hum with a dull orange glow as it powered up. "That's far enough," Gorok barked. His common speech was rough and accented. He stepped forward, boots crunching over metal shards, keeping the shotgun trained squarely on Vance's chest. Up close, Gorok was even more imposing, a head taller than Vance, with shoulders like a bull. A pair of curved tusks jutted from his bottom jaw, giving his scowl a truly fearsome edge. Vance raised his hands slowly, showing he carried no weapon in them, though the heavy rifle slung on his back and the sidearms on Jinx and Delia were plainly visible. "Easy, we're not here to cause trouble." "That's so," Gorok snarled. His eyes flicked over each of the team. Jinx attempted a friendly smile. Delia just stared back coolly. "Trespassers show up after dark, armed to the teeth. If you're not here for trouble, you sure found some." He cocked the shotgun with a menacing K-chick. Sparks spoke in the team's comms with a note of dark humor. "Great start. I'd calculate odds, but let's just say he's not bluffing." Vance kept his tone level and calm. "Name's Vance. We're scavengers like you. Heard you might have some prime salvage around. We have currency." "Don't want currency," Gorok spat, not lowering the gun an inch. "And I don't need help scavenging. This is my yard. Every bolt in it is mine." Delia's patience was wearing thin. "Look, we just..." Vance made a subtle motion with his hand to silence him. The last thing they needed was Delia's temper sparking a firefight. He tried another tack, voice cordial. "We respect that this is your operation, but we're looking for something specific. Rumor is an advanced weapon came through here, alien tech. We'd like to take it off your hands for a good price." At the mention of an alien weapon, Gorok's upper lip curled, revealing a chipped fang. He let out a harsh grunt. "You've been listening to drunks and fools. No weapons here but the junk I sell for scrap." His tone was unconvincing, too defensive. Vance noted the way the mechanic's gaze shifted ever so slightly, as if betraying a hidden worry. Jinx stepped forward a half step, lowering her wrench to appear non-threatening. "I see pieces of consortium cruisers over there, and that looks like an old Earth Alliance fighter cockpit," she said, gesturing around at various recognizable hull fragments. "You find all kinds of curios in a place like this, huh?" "Found nothing, and you lot won't find nothing either," Gorok snapped. He jabbed a thick finger into the air. "Now turn those fancy boots around and walk back the way you came. Yard's closed for business, permanently." The implication was clear. Leave or else. A tense beat passed. Vance realized pressing him further would likely end poorly. Before he could decide whether to retreat or change tactics, Sparks's urgent whisper came through their earpieces. "Movement on the perimeter, 10 o'clock. Unidentified life forms slithering in fast." Shah's voice followed an instant later, low and controlled. "Visual on 3 bogies incoming through the scrap mounds. Size of wolves, maybe bigger. They'll reach the fence in 20 seconds. Junk pile gobblers. Of all times, the nocturnal predators had to show up now. These creatures prowled scrapyards at night, hunting for basically anything warm and moving. Vance's eyes darted toward the darkness beyond Gorok's lights. Gorok noticed the shift. "What?" he started to ask, but Vance moved. He stepped forward and clamped a hand on Gorok's massive shoulder to urge him back. But Gorok shook him off. With a guttural battle cry, the mechanic charged into the dark toward the incoming creatures, shotgun blazing. They had no time to lose. As Gorok opened fire on the gobblers, Vance hissed into the comm, "Go! Find cover!" They darted away from the floodlights and into the maze of scrap. Jinx nearly tripped over a metal hatch in the side of a fallen Corvette hull. Without hesitating, she pulled it open. "In here," she whispered. One by one, the team ducked into the derelict ship's dark interior and pulled the hatch shut. Crammed inside the musty corridor of the old Corvette, they held their breath as snarls and shrieks echoed outside. Through a crack in the hull, they caught glimpses of Gorok's flashlight beam and the flash of his shotgun in the distance, drawing the creatures away. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, Jinx realized what they were hiding in. Despite the dust and rust, she recognized the layout of a small Corvette. Her heart fluttered with excitement even now. "This old girl might still have some life in her," Jinx whispered, running a gloved hand over a cracked instrument panel lovingly. "Greg here would love to screw her back to life." Liu gave the faintest snort, and even Shah managed a whisper of a chuckle from her perch by the hatch. Vance shook his head, though they could hear a hint of a smile in his voice. "Later, Tan. Mission first." Jinx nodded, and reluctantly tore herself away from the cockpit. Once they were sure the coast was clear, she made a silent promise to return for the Corvette if they could. After several tense minutes, the sounds of Gorok's skirmish faded into the night. Nothing but the creaks of settling metal broke the silence. Sparks came back on comms, her voice hushed. "No hostiles in pursuit. Gorok either killed them or scared them off. I'm picking up his transponder, moving back toward his shack. He likely thinks you all ran off." "Maybe we should have thanked him," Jinx whispered as they carefully emerged from their hiding spot. Delia gave a quiet, dark chuckle. "He did what anyone would, protect his territory. Gratitude's probably not his thing." Vance grimaced, peering around to ensure no creatures lingered. "Either way, we owe him one. Let's finish what we came for before anything else goes bump in the night." They pushed on, weaving through the maze of scrap. Sparks guided them with a faint overlay map on their visors, pieced together from pre-mission intel and Liu's scans. The target zone was a heavily cluttered sector near the yard's center, where satellite imagery had hinted at something unusual buried deep. "Approaching target area," Sparks reported after a time. "I'm picking up faint power signatures about 200 meters ahead. Could be the weapon system under a lot of mass." Shah, now back on the ground with the group, studied the ghostly outlines ahead. "That big pile in the middle looks like part of a cruiser hull collapsed onto something." They came to an entrance of sorts, a canyon formed by towering scrap piles. Old hull plates and beams leaned overhead, creating a tunnel-like path. It was both sheltering and foreboding. Once they went in, escape might be difficult if things went bad. Vance motioned for Delia and Shah to take the high ground along the canyon walls. The two nodded and silently began climbing up opposite sides of the scrap heaps, finding footholds among girders and half-crushed engine pods. Jinx and Liu stayed with Vance, proceeding carefully down the middle. "Metal density is starting to interfere with the signal," Sparks warned, her voice crackling slightly. "Stay within line of sight." Jinx glanced upward to ensure Delia and Shah remained visible. She spotted Delia's silhouette scaling a crooked metal spire on the left, and Shah crawling across a ridge to the right. "Just holler if you see something we don't," Jinx whispered into comms. Delia flashed a thumbs up from above. They descended deeper. Underfoot, the ground sloped downward and loose debris shifted with each step. Dangling wires and bent rebar brushed against their helmets like grasping fingers. Twice, Vance had to hold up a hand and carefully redirect their path to avoid patches of unstable wreckage or an unexploded ordnance wedged precariously among the junk. Each time, Jinx's mechanical savvy and Liu's scanner helped identify the hazard. At the bottom of the sloping path, the canyon opened into a small clearing of sorts, a pit surrounded by mounds of twisted metal. And there, protruding from the largest mound, was something that made Vance's breath catch. A massive, curved piece of machinery, unmistakably alien in design. It looked like the barrel of a giant cannon, partially buried at a steep angle. The metal was a strange, dark alloy, etched with patterns unlike any human or known alien manufacture. This had to be it. Jinx's eyes widened. That's it. It has to be, she breathed. Up on the ridge, Shah adjusted her position and murmured into the comm. I see it too. The thing looks intact and unguarded, almost too easy. Liu crept up to the base of the scrap pile, pulling out a handheld scanner. Its readout flickered with static from all the metal, but he nodded. No active signals aside from a low power flux. Maybe our lucky day for once. Luck? Delia echoed from his perch on a heap to the left. Let's not jinx it. Down below, Jinx couldn't help but smirk. Ha-ha, she whispered wryly, catching Delia's unintended pun. Vance carefully approached the half-buried cannon. He ran a gloved hand along the exposed barrel, wiping away decades of grime. The metal underneath was pristine black and unnaturally smooth. It's in one piece. How the hell did Gorik not strip this for scrap? Maybe he tried and couldn't, Liu offered quietly. Alien alloys, security measures, or he was just smart enough to leave it alone. Jinx knelt by the base of the barrel where it disappeared under layers of junk. Using Greg, she tapped it and listened to the faint, solid clang. This was mounted on something big, a warship, I'd bet. Possibly a battle cruiser. Vance's jaw tightened. Years ago, Earth intelligence had lost track of an experimental alien battle cruiser that vanished in this sector. Could the entire ship be here, entombed under scrap? He exchanged a glance with Liu, who was clearly thinking the same thing. Liu found what looked like a maintenance panel on the side of the turret base. To his surprise, it budged when pried with the tip of Jinx's wrench, opening to reveal intricate crystalline circuitry within. Bingo, Liu whispered. He pulled a palm-sized data siphon device from his kit. I'll try to extract whatever data is on this thing. Sparks, ready for uplink? A burst of static on the comm was Sparks's only reply. The canyon's interference was cutting her off. Still, she was likely recording everything via their suit cams. Liu carefully connected the siphon's prongs to the alien port inside the panel. The device's tiny screen began scrolling code as it negotiated the interface. Jinx aimed her helmet light to help him see. It's drawing data. Yes, I've got something, Liu reported, excitement in his voice. Schematics. Logs. It's copying them. High above, Shah kept her rifle poised, scanning the darkness. Delia did the same on the opposite side. For a brief moment, the only sounds were the faint hum of the siphon and the distant drip of some chemical fluid leaking from the junk. Then, without warning, the darkness was shattered by a blinding wash of red light. An unseen source beneath them powered on, bathing the entire clearing in an eerie crimson glow. Pull back! Vance yelled instinctively, shielding his eyes as the scrap pile came alive. With a thunderous groan, metal debris began sliding off the buried cannon. The massive barrel moved, actually moved, angling upward as if some giant had woken and was lifting an arm. Jinx stumbled back, nearly losing her balance as the ground under her lurched. Delia, clinging to his high perch, shouted a warning. Something's moving under us! Liu snatched the siphon out just before the panel snapped shut. Screens across the turret's surface suddenly blinked with alien symbols. A deep, resonant voice boomed from somewhere below, barking words in an unknown tongue that reverberated through the scrap canyon. Inside their helmets, Sparks managed to cut through the interference at last. That sounded like an alert. Translating, it said, "Intruders detected. Self-destruct sequence initiated." Vance's blood ran cold. Self-destruct? Before he could react, defense systems sprang to life. With metallic clangs, hidden panels burst open around the clearing, automated gun turrets emerging from beneath rusted sheets, swiveling toward the team. "Ambush!" Shah called, already squeezing her trigger. Her silenced sniper round took out the sensor cluster of one turret before it could fire. Delia flung himself flat against the scrap as another turret opened up with a stream of sizzling plasma bolts, narrowly missing him. The clearing erupted in chaos. Vance dove behind a charred chunk of hull, the turret's bullets sparking off the metal above him. "Contact! Multiple automated defenses!" he shouted. Jinx scrambled for cover behind the now upright cannon barrel, which at least provided a thick shield. Liu hunkered beside her behind a toppled engine block, clutching the precious siphon with their data. Delia rolled behind a heap of scrap on the left side as a third turret sprayed the area, red tracers lighting up the dark. He gritted his teeth. This was exactly the mayhem he'd been ready for. From his belt, Delia pulled a grenade, primed it, and with a side-armed fling sent it skittering across the ground toward that turret. Boom. The explosion blew the turret to scrap. Vance popped out of cover long enough to launch an EMP charge from his rifle's underbarrel. The small device arced through the air and detonated in a crackling wave over the last active gun. Its servos whined and then died, the turret drooping aimlessly. Silence for half a second. Then a new sound rose, a buzzing, whirring, swarm-like sound. As they caught their breath, a swarm of small airborne drones poured from the wreck, red eyes glowing, Sparks warned. Tiny insectile attack drones, each no larger than a fist, came pouring out of vents in the canyon walls. The team sprang into action again. Shah and Delia picked the drones off with quick surgical shots. Each pop from Shah's rifle, dropping a drone from the sky, Delia's pistol blasting another. Jinx even swatted one out of the air with a swing of Greg, sending it clattering to the ground. The last drone exploded in a spray of sparks against Vance's shoulder plating, making him grunt, but his armor held. They barely had a moment to regroup when two spidery combat walkers clawed their way out of the debris, eyes blazing red. Each stood on four metal legs like a nightmare spider, with a squat body and an array of built-in weapons. One walker fired a burst of sizzling plasma, forcing the team to scatter behind whatever cover they could find. Shah's rifle cracked and a high-caliber round blew out one walker's knee joint, sending it lurching to one side. Seizing the moment, Jinx grabbed a loose fuel cell at her feet, a compact fusion core that had tumbled free, and slapped a magnetic mine from her kit onto it. "Fire in the hole!" she yelled, giving the jury-rigged bomb a hard shove toward the crippled walker. The cylindrical core rolled right under the walker's chassis. Delia fired a single shot, detonating the mine. The blast was like a miniature sun. The walker was there 1 second and a heap of flaming scrap the next. The second walker lunged forward, but Vance unleashed a fusillade of rounds that shattered its sensor array and sent it collapsing in a shower of sparks. For a moment, the scrap canyon was quiet again, save for the crackle of small fires and the team's heavy breathing. Shah cautiously climbed down from her sniper perch to rejoin the others on the ground, keeping her rifle trained outward. Sparks finally came through clearly on the comms, her tone urgent and fearful, an unusual emotion for the typically dry AI. "Team, you need to evacuate immediately. We noticed," Liu panted, wiping sweat and grime off his face. Self-destruct's on, isn't it? No, you don't understand, Sparks insisted. I'm reading the heat signature of a reactor coming online down there. It's not just a small charge to destroy the weapon, it's the entire battle cruiser. If that reactor blows, it will obliterate at least half the moon. A stunned beat. They'd all suspected it, but hearing it confirmed made the blood drain from Vance's face. If the whole cruiser was about to explode, this moon was about to become a very large crater. How long do we have? Vance asked tersely, already calculating exits. 15 minutes total from when it started, Sparks replied. By my count, about 10 minutes left now. Shaw muttered a curse. We'll never make it off planet in 10 minutes on foot. Delia scrambled over to the others, checking the ammo left in his pistol. Our drop shuttle's a couple kilometers back where we landed. Even if we sprint. Even if we got there, we couldn't clear the blast radius in time, Liu said, shaking his head. Not with an explosion that size. Jinx's mind was racing, and then she realized their only hope might be the very thing she had fallen in love with earlier. The Corvette, she blurted out, turning to the others. That old ship we hid in, it might still fly. It's our only chance to get off this rock fast enough. Shaw looked uncertain. That heap, it's been sitting dead for years. It's tougher than it looks, Jinx insisted, conviction in her eyes. I can get her running, or at least flying enough to get us clear. We have to try, unless any of you have a better idea? No one did. Vance trusted Jinx's gut on things like this. He nodded sharply. All right, we make for the Corvette. Double time. Move. They ran. Behind them, deep under the scrap, an ominous rumble had begun, evidence that the self-destruct countdown was reaching critical systems. The ground itself vibrated with distant tremors. Sparks kept the timer on each of their HUDs, a red clock ticking down the minutes and seconds in the corner of their vision. 7:45. 7:44. The team retraced their steps through the scrap labyrinth at a breakneck pace. They hurdled twisted beams and ducked under half-collapsed structures. More than once, an aftershock from below nearly knocked them off their feet. At last, they skidded into the section of the yard where the little Corvette lay half-buried. The makeshift hatch they'd used earlier was still propped open. The ship's dark, scarred hull was just visible in the glow of the distant red emergency light now pulsing across the scrapyard. All clear for now, Shaw said, scanning the perimeter through her scope. There was no sign of drones or walkers. Those had all been destroyed back at the wreckage, but that didn't mean other threats weren't closing in. The shrill howls of junk gobblers echoed faintly. The creatures were likely spooked by the tremors and noise. Jinx was already up on the Corvette's side, yanking the hatch fully open again. Liu, with me. We'll get the reactor and engines online, she ordered as she disappeared into the dark interior. On it! Liu followed without hesitation, flipping on his shoulder lamp. Delia, Shah, establish a perimeter, Vance said, breathing hard. Buy us whatever time you can. The sniper and the wild card nodded. Delia climbed atop a pile of scrap like it was second nature, taking a high position overlooking the ship. Shah knelt behind an old cargo container, rifle trained outward, covering a different angle. Vance himself stood at the hatch entrance, both to assist Jinx if needed, and to provide close defense. Sparks, tie into the Corvette system if possible. Do anything you can to speed this up. Roger that, Sparks responded. If you can get me a connection, I'll run startup diagnostics. Inside the Corvette's cramped cockpit, Jinx slid into the pilot's chair and wiped a thick layer of dust off the console. Even in the urgency of the moment, she felt a small thrill. She was in the captain's seat of this derelict beauty, about to bring it back from the dead. Power's completely down, she told Liu, who was at an open floor panel exposing the ship's innards. "Find the main breaker or an auxiliary power coupling." Liu coughed at the stale, acrid air inside the ship. "There's a small fusion cell here. Looks nearly drained, but maybe enough to boot the core." He flipped a series of switches on an ancient breaker panel. A few lights on the console flickered weakly, then died. Jinx clicked her tongue. "Not enough juice." Outside, Delia's voice crackled over comms, tense. "We've got movement. Creatures coming out of the junk about 30 meters west." He peered through his rifle's sight. 2 gobblers were slinking toward the corvette, drawn by the vibrations and noise. Shah saw them too through her scope. "I have eyes. 2 targets. Engaging." Pop! Her rifle spat a round that caught the lead gobbler in the flank. It screeched and scuttled behind a heap of scrap, wounded but not down. The second one let out a hiss and bounded forward, only to catch a burst of Delia's carbine. It collapsed in a spasming heap. "Keep them off us!" Vance barked, glancing back over his shoulder even as he stayed half inside the hatch, guarding Jinx and Liu. Jinx hopped out of the pilot seat and clambered toward the hatch. "Delia, there's a portable generator unit by the landing gear. The yellow box on treads. Drag it over here." "On it!" Delia slid down his perch and sprinted toward the landing strut where he'd earlier noticed that heavy generator Gorok must have left. He grunted, muscling the unit onto its wheels and rolling it over cables and debris to the ship. Vance reached down and hauled it up to the hatch with one arm. Jinx quickly clamped the generator's output leads to an exposed power coupling under the cockpit console. "Firing up auxiliary power. Now!" She hit the generator's ignition. The portable unit chugged to life, humming loudly. Almost immediately, lights began to flicker across the corvette's console. "Yes! Come on, baby!" Jinx flipped the main reactor switch. The ship's system struggled, then a low rumble reverberated through the hull as the reactor core engaged. Dull emergency lighting blinked on inside. "Core is at 15% and rising," Liu reported from the co-pilot seat, where he monitored the shaky power readouts. "It'll have to do." Jinx plugged a cable from her wrist PDA into the console and tapped a flurry of commands. "Sparks, I'm giving you access. Now!" "Copy," Sparks said. In an instant, the ship's half-dead computer sprang to life with a new voice in its circuits. "Running boot diagnostics. I'll handle flight control calibration. You focus on the engines." Outside, another trio of gobblers, attracted by the generator's noise and the humming ship, came crawling over a pile. Shah nailed one clean through the skull before it leapt. Delia emptied half a magazine to drive the others back temporarily, but he could see more glowing eyes gathering in the darkness beyond. Time was almost up. Inside, Jinx desperately worked through the startup sequence. The engine status showed yellow warnings, but she overrode the caution. "Just get us off the ground," she muttered, coaxing the thrusters to life. The hull rattled as the primary thruster turbines began to spin up. "Engines are live," she shouted. "Everyone on board now," Vance ordered. Delia and Shah broke from their positions and dashed to the ship. Shah scrambled up the landing gear and into the hatch, Delia right at her heels. A wounded gobbler chose that moment to lunge from the shadows towards the open hatch, hissing viciously. Vance put it down with a short burst from his rifle. "Go! Go!" he yelled to Delia and Shah as they dove inside. Vance was about to follow when, through the swirling red-tinged darkness, he spotted a figure limping toward them. Gorok. The alien had blood running down one arm and moved with a hitch in his step, but he was alive, and drawn by the roar of the corvette's awakening engines, he had come to investigate. The mechanic's eyes were wide with a mix of fury and alarm as he realized the humans were stealing his ship. He raised a fist and bellowed something lost in the noise. Vance knew Gorok wouldn't survive what was coming, nor would he outrun it on foot. Vance made a snap decision. He bolted from the hatch and sprinted towards the alien. "Goruk, come on!" he shouted, waving the big guy toward the ship. Goruk, stubborn even now, shook his head and stumbled backwards, unwilling to abandon his life's work. "This is all your fault," he roared over the din, though fear was creeping into his voice as the ground quaked violently beneath his feet. Vance didn't have time to argue. He charged up to Goruk, narrowly avoiding a collapsing piece of scaffolding, and grabbed the alien around the waist. Goruk was heavy, but adrenaline gave Vance strength. He hauled the struggling mechanic back toward the Corvette. "Let me go!" Goruk snarled, weakly pounding at Vance's back with his one good arm. "Saving your life, you ungrateful!" Vance gritted out as he half-dragged, half-carried Goruk the last few meters. At the hatch, Delia and Shah leaned out, grabbing hold of Goruk's arms and Vance's armored collar. Together, they yanked the mechanic and the captain up into the ship's interior. Jinx hit the hatch closure. The thick door slammed shut just as a tremor rippled through the ground, sending a rain of scrap clattering off the Corvette's hull. "Punch it, Jinx!" Vance shouted, slumping into a wall seat and still holding a gasping Goruk at his side. Jinx needed no further prompting. She engaged the thrusters to full. With a thunderous roar, the Corvette's engines fired and the ship lurched upward. For a terrifying second, it scraped against an adjacent junk pile, grinding metal on metal, but then it broke free, rising into the night sky. Inside the cabin, everyone and everything not strapped down was jolted. Shah and Delia were thrown into a heap against one bulkhead. Liu clung to the co-pilot controls for dear life. Goruk sprawled on the floor, eyes wild, clutching his shotgun with white knuckles. Vance planted himself in the middle of the cabin, bracing wide to avoid tumbling. "Stabilizing," Sparks chimed in, diverting power to the inertial dampeners. The ride smoothed marginally as the ship gained altitude. The Corvette blasted skyward, engines screaming. Below, the scrapyard erupted in a blinding flash as the battlecruiser's reactor detonated. A wave of heat and force slammed into the rising ship, tossing it like a toy. The hull groaned, and the crew were nearly thrown from their seats as debris hammered the shields. Jinx fought the controls, alarms blaring as the ship spun wildly for a few heart-stopping seconds. Then, with a final jolt, they burst through into the calm darkness of space. Silence filled the cabin except for the ragged panting of the crew and the persistent thrum of the Corvette's overtaxed engines. They had made it just in time. Below, through the rear cameras, they could see half of the scrapyard moon's surface consumed by a glowing inferno. An entire chunk of the moon was simply gone, vaporized in the blast, with a cloud of debris slowly expanding into orbit. We made it," Delia said softly, still half in disbelief as he peeled himself off the floor. A weak cheer came from Liu, who managed a grin despite a bruise forming on his forehead. Shah let out a long breath and clapped Jinx on the shoulder. "Hell of a flight, Tan." Jinx let out a shaky laugh, easing back on the throttle now that they were safely away. "Hell of a team effort," she replied. "Sparks, you get co-pilot credit for keeping us in one piece." "Glad I could help," Sparks replied, the AI's tone light but tinged with the electronic equivalent of nausea. "Let's not cut it that close again, okay?" Vance, still catching his breath, glanced over to Goruk. The alien was slumped against a bulkhead, eyes shut and breathing hard. Remarkably, he still hadn't let go of his shotgun. Vance moved closer and put a hand on Goruk's shoulder, not roughly, but firmly. Goruk's eyes opened and he looked around at the humans in a daze. "You saved me," he muttered, sounding equal parts angry and grateful. Vance gave a small nod. "We weren't about to leave anyone behind." Goruk's expression was complex, scowl and relief mixed into one. After a pause, he grunted, "Stupid humans." But there was no venom in it this time. He winced, finally acknowledging the gash on his arm where a gobbler had clawed him. Liu was already reaching for his medkit. As Liu began tending to Gorok's wounds, the rest of the crew settled into the small cabin's benches or on the floor, exhaustion catching up. For a minute, no one spoke. They just listened to the hum of the ship, felt the vibration of its engines, and stared out a small viewport at the stars beyond. "We got what we came for," Liu finally said, holding up the data siphon he had clung to throughout the chaos. Its indicator light glowed green. "Weapon data intact. Earth Command's going to be very interested in this." Vance managed a weary smile. Then the mission wasn't a total fiasco after all. The corvette, rattling but functional, arced away from the ruined moon to rendezvous with their support ship in orbit. They'd all earned some rest and a hell of a debriefing. 3 days later, in the grand atrium of Earth Command Central, Vance's team stood at attention in full dress uniform. The space was abuzz with murmurs. Dozens of high-ranking officers and dignitaries had gathered before a raised stage. Word had spread quickly of the crew's exploits, how they prevented a catastrophic explosion from wiping out a colony sector by sheer courage and quick thinking. The official report was generous, sparing the more chaotic details. Admiral Ko stepped up to a podium at center stage. The authoritative woman with steel grey hair surveyed the assembled crowd, then the 6 heroes before her, Vance, Shah, Delia, Liu, Jinx, and a special holo-emitter displaying Sparks' avatar. The room fell silent. She began by addressing the crowd. "We are here to recognize a team that went above and beyond the call of duty." Then, with a proud smile, she approached Vance first. "Lieutenant Vance," the Admiral said, affixing a medal on his chest. "For exceptional leadership and valor, you kept your team together under impossible circumstances and refused to leave even a single life behind." Vance bowed his head as the medal was pinned in place. He stood a little taller afterward, recalling how he'd carried Gorok through that firestorm. Leadership meant no one left behind, and command understood that. Next, Admiral Ko stepped to Shah. She attached a medal to her uniform. "Warrant Officer Shah, for extraordinary precision and calm under pressure. Your steady aim and keen eyes protected your team from countless threats." Shah accepted the medal with a composed nod. Her expression barely changed, but those who knew her could tell she was proud. She moved to Delia and attached a medal to his uniform as well. "Sergeant Ren Delia, for fearless initiative and adaptability. In the face of chaos, you acted decisively and creatively, turning the tide at critical moments. Your daring spirit is an asset to our forces." Delia bit his lip to hide a growing grin. His cheeks warmed as he murmured a respectful thank you. Being praised for doing things his own way, he'd savor that. At Liu, Admiral Ko pinned a medal on him. "Lieutenant Liu, for exemplary service as both a scientist and a medic. In the heat of battle, you maintained clarity of thought, securing vital data while safeguarding your team's lives. Your quick thinking saved the day." Liu gave a polite smile and nod. Recognition for the behind-the-scenes work felt good, though he'd likely tease the others later that he deserved a bonus for stress pay. Admiral Ko then clipped a medal onto Jinx's chest. "Sergeant Jinx Tan, for unparalleled ingenuity and perseverance. When all odds were against you, you brought a derelict ship back to life and carried your team to safety. Your technical brilliance and spirit kept hope alive." Jinx beamed so brightly, it was a wonder the room didn't light up. She winked down the line toward her teammates and even blew a subtle kiss toward Greg the Wrench hanging at her side. Finally, Admiral Ko turned to the hollow emitter where Sparks' feminine outline stood. "And Sparks," she said, her tone warm, "for outstanding service in intelligence and operational support. You provided essential information, coordination, and even piloting under dire conditions. You have proven that heroism isn't limited to flesh and blood. Earth Command extends its highest commendation to you as an integral member of this team. The Admiral picked up a small platinum medallion from a tray. We weren't entirely sure how to present this, she noted with a light laugh, drawing chuckles from the audience. Instead of pinning it, she placed the medal on the podium in front of Sparks's avatar. Sparks's glowing figure bowed her head in gratitude. "Thank you, Admiral. I will cherish it, virtually of course," she added, earning another ripple of laughter through the hall. With the medals awarded, Admiral Ko stepped back to address everyone once more. This team's actions saved lives and preserved vital knowledge. They turned a potential catastrophe into a story of triumph. Her voice carried richly through the atrium. In recognition of their extraordinary efforts, Earth Command has authorized a special reward. She gestured toward the enormous hangar doors at the back of the atrium. They began to open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a bay beyond. The ship that carried them to safety, a corvette that by all rights should never have flown again, has been fully restored by our best engineers. It will serve as the new base of operations for this team. Ladies and gentlemen, the Admiral declared as the hangar doors finished opening, behold the SnarkRemark. Sunlight flooded in, illuminating the craft parked outside. The corvette no longer looked like scrap. It gleamed with fresh dark grey plating, the scorch marks of age gone. Painted proudly across its side, in crisp white letters, was its new name, SnarkRemark. The crowd burst into applause and cheers. Jinx let out a delighted squeal upon seeing the ship, bouncing once on her toes. Shah chuckled, and Delia flashed a broad grin at Jinx's excitement. Liu's eyebrows lifted in pleasant surprise, impressed at the transformation. Vance's chest swelled with pride. Sparks's avatar flickered with what looked like a happy dance on her podium. Admiral Ko smiled at the team. "Appropriate, I think, given the commentary reports from your missions," she said wryly, referring to the ship's cheeky new name. "Earth Command is confident you will honor the SnarkRemark with your trademark wit and effectiveness. May this ship carry you to many future successes." Vance stepped forward and saluted. "Thank you, Admiral. We won't let you down, and we'll take good care of her." With that, the formal ceremony concluded. Cameras flashed as the Admiral shook each of their hands. Even Gorok, cleaned up and bandaged, had been invited to attend as a guest. He stood off to the side of the stage, arms crossed and looking thoroughly out of place in borrowed formal wear. When the team caught his eye, he gave them a single approving nod before attempting to scowl, which fooled no one. Jinx suppressed a giggle at the sight. That evening, aboard the newly christened SnarkRemark, the crew gathered in the galley. Earth loomed large and blue outside a small viewport, for the ship was in low orbit, a temporary stopover before their next orders. The galley itself was cozy, a central table bolted to the floor, with booths along the curved bulkhead. It smelled of new metal and, at the moment, freshly brewed coffee. Jinx fiddled with the shiny beverage dispenser installed in the corner. "They said they stocked her with all essentials," she murmured. Suddenly, the machine whirred and hot liquid streamed out. "Ha! Found it!" She triumphantly held up a steaming pot. The rich aroma of real coffee filled the air. "Now that's a welcome smell," Shah said, leaning back in her chair. Back in. She cradled the mug Jinx poured for her, inhaling appreciatively. Liu accepted a mug as well and took a long sniff. "We've earned coffee that doesn't taste like it was brewed in an old boot." Vance raised his mug in agreement. "I'll drink to that," he said. The others murmured enthusiastic assent. Jinx plopped down next to Delia, her own mug in hand, Greg the wrench never far from her side. She lifted her cup high. "To the SnarkRemark," she said proudly. They clinked their mugs together, a gentle chorus of ceramic taps amid the quiet hum of the ship. One can only imagine what comes next, Liu chuckled as he took a sip. As if on cue, sparks joined in from the overhead speakers. I've taken the liberty of downloading 1 million coffee recipes, she teased. On the wall screen, Sparks's avatar appeared, raising a cartoonish mug of digital coffee. I'll cheers to that, hopefully with fewer self-destruct sequences next time, she quipped. They laughed at that, the tension of the recent days finally melting into genuine mirth. The camaraderie in the galley was palpable. They had been through fire together, quite literally, and come out the other side not just intact, but stronger. After the laughter subsided, Jinx set her mug down and dramatically produced a small silver case from under the table. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she popped it open. Inside, nestled in foam, was the medal she had received that afternoon, and right beside it a second, much smaller medal jury-rigged from spare parts. It was attached via a blue ribbon to a polished mini-wrench that looked just like Greg. Liu nearly snorted coffee out of his nose when he realized what it was. Is that? A medal for Greg, Jinx declared, holding up the tiny decorated wrench. The entire crew burst into amused laughter. You seriously made your wrench a medal? Delia cackled, shaking his head. Greg saved our butts too, you know, Jinx insisted with a defiant grin. She reached over and affixed the little medal onto the handle of the real Greg, which leaned against her chair. The wrench gleamed with a proud little ribbon. He's my right-hand man, tool. He deserves recognition. Vance rubbed a hand over his face, chuckling deeply. Poor Admiral Coe. If she knew, she'd probably regret saying every member of the team. Sparks chimed in over the speaker, voice laced with amusement. I'm officially logging 1 commendation for extraordinary service to a wrench. More laughter filled the galley, ringing warm and free. Goruk, hovering quietly near the doorway, allowed himself a small grunt that might have been a chuckle at the ridiculous sight of Jinx saluting her wrench. Vance stood and raised his mug once more, prompting everyone to do the same. His eyes traveled over his crew, his family, really. We couldn't have made it without every single one of us, wrench and AI included, to whatever comes next, he said warmly. Here, here, Shah added, and they all clinked their mugs again in a final affirming toast. They drank and drifted into easy conversation, recounting the craziest moments of the mission, gently ribbing Delia about singeing his hair when the engine backfired on takeoff. He rolled his eyes with a smile, or teasing Shah about finally needing a new rifle scope since hers had gotten cracked by debris. She took it in stoic stride. Outside the viewport, Earth's curved horizon shone in the sunlight, slowly turning beneath them. Beyond that, an infinite sea of stars beckoned. After a while, the chatter faded into a comfortable silence. Each member of the team found themselves gazing out at those stars. Jinx, nestled contentedly with a refill of coffee, rested her hand on Greg's metal handle and whispered, "Get ready for more adventures, buddy." As if responding in unison, the crew lifted their eyes to the cosmos. Without a word, they all felt the same resolve. Whatever future adventures awaited out there in the dark, they would face them together. The UES SnarkRemark sailed on through the void, carrying the laughter and bravery of its crew, a tiny snarky light against the darkness, ready for whatever came next. That was Ko-Fi Protocol, your weekly reminder that humans are terrifying, unkillable chaos machines with duct tape and no respect for safety protocols. Be sure to tune in again next Friday for another brand new episode featuring the crew of the UES SnarkRemark. Like what you saw, then hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, or sparks might reroute your ship's heating through the espresso line, and comment below, preferably with detailed planetary coordinates. Or, just where you're watching from. And if you'd like to support the madness, our Patreon welcomes brave souls with open airlocks. And now take care, dear humans. Fuck yeah.